AI tools are rapidly evolving, and today I'm showing you how these new tools can be used to augment a 3D workflow. We'll be using a tool called Invisia, a versatile platform that brings multiple AI models and tools into one space for pre-visualization, render augmentation, and rapid idea generation. I know the use of AI in artistic spaces is controversial, but I believe it's just another tool at the hands of an artist. So my goal is to show you how to test complex ideas in minutes rather than hours. For the Blender user, we'll look at augmenting scenes in ways that would be difficult or time-consuming to do manually. If you aren't a Blender user, perhaps you're an architect or a product designer, I'll show you how this works as a powerful standalone prototyping tool. Full disclosure, while this video isn't sponsored, I've been working with the Invisia team to test these tools, and I've included an affiliate link in the description. If you use it, it helps support the channel at no extra cost to you. So in this video, we're going to look at 4 ways of using Invisia AI with Blender or as a standalone creative tool. So number 1, to augment existing Blender renderings. Number 2, to brainstorm creative ideas for a Blender scene. Number 3, for rapid architectural visualization. And number 4, for rapid product design visualization. We'll start with a practical example, exploring a new tile layout. While changing a material's color in Blender is simple, reconfiguring a tile layout to something like a herringbone pattern can be time-consuming. So let's see how Invisia lets us previs that change quickly before we even touch a node or a mesh to see if it's a direction we want to pursue. So let's say that we have a scene that we're working on in Blender. In my particular case, I have this kitchen scene and I've got it all laid out and I'm liking it, but I've decided that maybe I want to test out a different pattern for these tiles in the background. And I really like the concept of a herringbone pattern, but just going out and quickly reconfiguring the walls with this is going to be a bit of a time-consuming challenge, and this is where Invisia can help us. We're going to come over here to create, and we're going to use one called image to render that allows us to alter an existing image in some way. So let's come over here. We're going to drop in the rendering that we've already produced from Blender. And we're going to give it a prompt. We're going to say, I want to change the backsplash tiles. Show me these white tiles with dark grout in a herringbone pattern. And then all we do is we just generate. So there we go. This is the first generation. And the amazing thing is when you look at it, even the reflections here are properly done. But let's do another idea. Let's have it generate another idea for us. So there we go. So this is the kind of thing that you can do with Invisia, is you can use it to rapidly prototype ideas that you may want to actually implement within Blender without the time-consuming work needed to go reconfigure the tiles themselves. So let's say that we want to try a different type of pattern that maybe we can't describe exactly, but we may actually have a swatch of what that tile is. So for instance, if we come down here to reference, let me upload an exact image of some tiles that I want to try. So the tile pattern that I want to try looks like this. All I need to do is just drag this over here into my reference area. And then we just give it a description. Replace the white kitchen tiles with the reference image vertical tiles image. The reference image tiles are a rough type of surface, okay? And then we generate. So after about a minute, I can kind of see what that looks like in my scene as to whether I want to try and actually implement that in Blender. It's a great rapid visualization tool, and you can try it out on other fun patterns just to kind of see what things look like quickly. Let's test another idea out. Let's say that we have this scene that we have got, it's all modeled, it's all lit, and I have this table and I'm thinking, maybe for this scene I would like it to be like a little bit more of a rustic table look, a little bit more organic, like reclaimed wood, but I don't necessarily want to go to the time of UV mapping it and finding a texture and setting all the texture up. I just want to test the idea out. So let's come back over here to Invisia and let's load up that image as our base image. Let's switch over the model to Nano Banana 2. It tends to work better at changing existing images. I'll show you some case examples where we're going to use the native imaging model, but we'll switch to Nano Banana 2 right here. And let's put in our prompt. Change the kitchen table to a rustic wood, like a rough reclaimed barn wood that's been turned into a dark, high-end and expensive dining table. And then we generate. So it's replaced that table with one that basically fits the description, and I can see if I kind of like that. So you can go through just a series of these iterations to find if this is a direction you want to go, and then to use as reference for setting that up in Blender itself. So while we're working on the table, let's do something really quick. Let me just re-upload our rendering of the table setting, and let's go ahead and augment it just a little bit. I think the setting is a little bit drab. So my prompt is, I want to improve the look of the dinner table setting, the plates and the glasses on the table. Add a lovely flower arrangement to the middle of the table and a glass pitcher of water. Add a white tablecloth to the table that slightly overhangs the edge of the table, and then we'll generate. So there we go. We've just augmented this rendering a little bit in case we just wanted to use this rendering just sweetened up a little bit with these adjustments. Let's look at another way that we can potentially use a service like Invisia with existing renderings. So you've gone to all the work of setting up your renderings, and let's say that you want to add people into it. Let's come over and let's upload an image. It's all done. I like the rendering, but I would really like to add a person into it to make it look a little bit more inviting. And we're going to put in a prompt that says, show a woman standing in the kitchen just in front of the sink. Her arms are folded and she's got a proud look on her face as if she's finally in her new kitchen that she loves. Let's go ahead and generate. So very quickly, it dropped in a person into the scene. But let's look at another example of another rendering that we want to add a person to. So here in this rendering, I've got a couch and I've got this sort of setting, but what if I want to add a person to this to make it look even a little bit more organic? Let's go ahead and load this up. And then let's go ahead and put a new prompt in for this. Add a young man sitting at the couch in casual office clothing, including a brown vest. He's relaxed and reading a book. The scene is realistic, matching the existing living room setting with sunlight, shadows, and materials preserved. And let's go ahead and generate. There we go. So that adds a really nice touch to my rendering. And in fact, the amazing thing is that it actually takes into account reflections on the glass, which is quite amazing. Now, what if you actually want to have a very specific person in a scene? Well, we can do that. So for instance, let's say that this is the person that we want to have actually posed in our scene. We can do that. So we will just take and load that into the reference area. Okay, there's that photo, and then we just put in the prompt, add the person in the reference image, so he's sitting on the couch. He is relaxed and reading a book. So you just put in a basic prompt. So let's make sure that we come up here and change the mode, and then we just generate. You can test out multiple poses. You could also describe if you want them on the left side or the right side, but that's basically how easy it is to add a specific person. So let's take another look at what's possible with this with just a photograph. I have a photograph of this house, but it's got sort of the winter snow thing going on. And what if I want to visualize this for, say, a client during the summer? Well, we can do that. So we will just upload that image, and then we'll put in our prompt. A modern house during the summer, green grass on the front yard, trees surrounding the house, strong summer sun at 3 p.m., and then we generate. So you can very easily change one type of image into another with this system. Now I'm also going to have it change the perspective on this. So let's come in and close this out over here, and we're going to select from previous creation and we're going to select this newly created image. We're going to put in a new prompt, a tight close-up from an asymmetric oblique front left perspective, and let's have it generate a new view from that description and image. And we can compare it to the previous one with the compare function, and you can just check to make sure the building is consistent with itself, and I think that works pretty well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump over and we're going to see how we can use the animation or the video function. So this is where we can do some really interesting things with animation. Let's come over to video here. And what we're presented with is a user interface that allows us to set two poster frames, a beginning and an end frame, so we can load in the two frames that we just had. In this case, let's say that I want to go from the original snowy photograph and have it transition to the summer photograph that's at the new angle. So this is where we would come over and we would select the first frame and we would choose to upload that image. Now I uploaded the final frame first accidentally, so I'm going to switch that over to be the final frame, and then let's come back over here and now upload the original. So it's going to animate between the two, but I'm also going to put in a specific prompt. For the movement, slow, even movement, the scene changes from winter to spring with bright green grasses and trees, and then we generate. And then here we go. We can see it transitioning from the beginning wintry scene to the spring bright green daylight scene. It's pretty remarkable. Now we can also do this in sort of an open-ended way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load in just the beginning frame. So we will go ahead and load that up. I want to have the man on the couch reading his book, and I want to have him get up and walk out. So here we don't specify an ending frame, we just put in a prompt. The man gets up off the couch and walks out, and then we generate. And then we end up with this. The man gets up and he walks out. So let's talk about another really interesting thing that you can do with NVIDIA. Let's come over to the video section. You know, rendering animations can take a long time, even on very fast hardware. And it may be that you're trying to do something with an interior scene where you're simply wanting to move the camera from one point to another, a camera type of animation. You can actually invoke an AI system to really help with that. So we've got a beginning frame and an ending frame that we can specify. And if we take a look at this kitchen scene, let's say that we want to move the camera in towards it, but we'd also like to see something more dynamic with the sun sort of changing position. So what we do is we only render two frames, the beginning frame and the ending frame, and then we let NVIDIA determine the rest for us. Just like this, and then we just give it a prompt, smooth, even motion. We're not going to try to do too much else with it, and then we generate. And then after about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, it produces the video, and we get this. So this is the very cool thing. It correctly calculates all the intermediate frames in a very authentic way that would have taken a lot more time to do than 3 minutes if you had manually rendered each frame out. So let's take a look at another example. I'm going to clear all, and we're going to load 2 more frames in. So we come up here and choose a frame to drop in. And so this is sort of in my kitchen. It's backed out. We're at the far side of the kitchen, and we're going to zoom in to the other side. So let's bring in the other frame that I have already pre-rendered. So this is the endpoint where I want the camera, and we're not doing too much more besides just moving through the room. So you just generally describe smooth, even motion, and then you generate. And there we go. After about 3 minutes of processing, it has interpolated the motion through the room for us. Now, it's only doing 5 seconds. So you can take this into something like Final Cut Pro, reduce the speed by 50%, apply something like optical flow, and it will give you this really nice, smooth fly-through of an architectural type of scene. at much, much faster generation rate than if you had manually rendered each of those frames. Now, so far, what we've been doing so far is altering existing renderings. But there's another way that you could use a system like NVIDIA to generate ideas for a scene that you're currently building but haven't set up from a material standpoint yet. So for instance, we're going to come over here to one of the modes. These are all designed and tuned to bring in certain types of input. The engine will understand the kind of input that you're bringing in. In this case, we're going to go to 3D base to render, where it's going to understand that your input is like what we would sort of think of as a clay type of rendering. We're going to come over now and we're going to leave it in render this time, which is the native mode, which is going to be better for this type of novel creation. So we're going to come over and give it the data. So let's upload. Again, I call these clay renderings, right? They kind of look like clay, but there's just this basic shading. And what I did in Blender was I set the render engine to Workbench, and then you can just render out these nice sort of clay types of renderings without shading. The input system simply needs to be able to define the contours. We'll bring this in, and now we're going to give it a description. An elegant, warm room with an orange felt couch, a deep, rich oak wood side table, hanging globe lights. The back wall has vertical wood slats. The floor is a modern white tile with plush white carpet. The round coffee tables have a white marble top and gold metal parts. So you can really get in and just very intricately describe what you want this to be. The more detailed you are, the more accurate it's going to be based on your description. But if you just want to leave it general too, that's totally going to work. So then we just go ahead, and now it says image strength here. This is basically how close you want it to follow the contours of your lines versus how much you want creativity to take over. So you've got a couple of parameters that you can work with right here. If you want it to be more creative, you want it to really go to town and do something more interesting, then you can increase the creativity. These are things you can play with. And so now we'll just go ahead and generate. And there you go. So this is what it's done to interpret what I've put into the scene. It's changed a few things. I had kind of a sculpture over here. It's put in a little plant. But the idea here is to generate an idea of what you think you might want to do with your actual final scene. And being able to visualize different ideas can be really helpful in the brainstorming process for what you want to do with your actual scene. Now, what if we want to specifically change this back wall to a reference image? This is where we would go from a 3D base to render, and we would switch modes over here to the image to render because we have an actual image now that we want to rework. Let's go ahead and remove this. I'm going to pull in this rendering that we've just done, this image. We specifically want to tell the system that we're going to use this as our starting point. And then we come down here to our optional add-ons, and we're going to add a reference image. And this reference image is actually a wall pattern. So I want the background wall to use this herringbone pattern of this reclaimed wood. And then we're going to say, replace the wall with this reclaimed wood herringbone pattern. And then we generate. There we go. So now we can visualize that potential change for what we would do in our actual Blender scene if we wanted to do a herringbone pattern on the back wall like that or not. Let's take a look at another example where we can take a scene we're currently building in Blender and we just want to use this tool as a pre-visualization for potential shading and layout ideas. So we're going to come over here. Let's upload an image. Basically what I have is I have my quote unquote clay rendering of this kitchen scene that I'm currently building. It's almost done. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Let's bring our image strength up so it pays attention to the shapes and contours. And we're going to stick with render because, again, this is better for novel scene creation. And let's put in a prompt. A modern IKEA-style kitchen. The walls are white with white tiles and black grout. The cabinets are a light cream color. The lighting comes from the exterior sun, which is low in the sky because the sun is setting. The countertops are a white marble and the bar stools are black with white cushions. There's a white ceiling. And then we generate. And there we go. So it's given us sort of a first rendition of what this kitchen could look like in Blender. So this is where we could go in and we could start looking at it and say, well, maybe we want it to look a little bit different in a couple of areas. So we'll come in and let's change the tiles. We'll make them black tiles and white grout. And let's take the cabinets. The cabinets are a rich mahogany wood. And let's see what it gives us with just those two changes. So now we can see that all the cabinets have this nice mahogany wood. So again, the purpose of this as I visualize it is to allow yourself to start entertaining ideas for what you want to do with your actual materials before you have to go out to all the effort of UV mapping everything, for instance. It's a good pre-visualization tool. So let's take a look at another example. This is another example of a Blender scene in its clay form, as I call it. Let's go ahead and load that reference image up. And you can see all it is just this basic clay image of this rendering of the scene that I have in Blender. So we want to use this as a way of exploring creative potential. Let's go ahead now and add a prompt. A retro modern bathroom with 1950s mid-century modern design aesthetics. White and black wall tiles, globe lights around the center mirror, teak wall cabinets with a subtle wood pattern finish. So you just go through and you describe it, and then let's generate and see what it gives us. And there we go. So it's giving me something that looks really nice just in terms of idea generation. But what if we want to take this a step further? What if we want to have it explore further ideas without necessarily having to come in and play with the prompt? We can use that with the add reference area. So for instance, I've come down and I have just found a bunch of bathroom images that I want to use potentially as a design influence. So let's go ahead and use this one right here. I'm going to take this and drag it over here into the add reference. So let's bring up the influence just a little bit and then let's further generate. Same prompt, but now it's using this as an influence for the next image generation. And I really like this. You can see how it's just pulled some of the tonality and shapes and colors just to subtly influence this. But let's do another example where I bring in something that is even more stark. This gold and pink are pretty obvious, but let's see how this influences our scenes. Let's go ahead and close this down, and then we'll just drop this in as our reference, and then we will generate. So you can see how it's brought over just a little bit of this pink and gold tonality over to it. Let's do one more. Let's drive this up. Let's go to 60% and then see what influence that has. So there you can see how increasing the reference strength pulls more influence from that reference image, allowing you to test out ideas that you may not be able to capture solely through the prompt itself. It's a lot of fun to test these out, gives you a lot of design ideas. In this next section, we're going to look at using InVisia purely from the standpoint of visualization, not tied to using a 3D program. So let's say you're a product designer who has sketched things out, or you are an architect who is sketching ideas out. Even if they're rough and you want to test what these might look like in the real world fully shaded, that's what we're going to look at now. Imagine you've sketched this out. You've really gotten an idea of what it is that you want, but you really want to visualize it and flesh it out. So we would come over and we would change modes here. Since we've got a sketch, there's a mode specifically for sketches called sketch to render. The AI engine is expecting certain types of input and it understands these sketched out input. So we're just going to drag that in. And then we put in a prompt. A modern office building with concrete and metal exterior with slightly alternating patterns of shades on the concrete blocks. Concrete sidewalk and walkways to the entrance of the building. Tall glass windows, sunny summer day, and then we generate. And there we go. So in one fell swoop, it's given us something pretty reasonable to work with and mull over in our mind whether this is something we want. You can do multiple generations. For instance, if we come down here, you can see that there's a creativity slider. You can have it become more and more creative by driving this slider up to allow it to have more latitude to do interesting and novel things that may depart from your sketch. Now, let's say that we want to augment this a little bit for a presentation. You can see there is like an area that looks like a tree should be there. And let's say that it looks a little bit austere and we want to add a tree. So this is where we could come over and let's come up here. So I've actively selected this image generation and we could come over and do sketch in context. So when we do that, we can come over to a couple of tools that we have right here. Let's do brush. And I'm just going to draw in roughly kind of the shape of a tree that I'd like right here. Okay, something about like that. Okay, done. And then we come over here and we just type in a beautiful lush oak tree with new green leaves, something descriptive like that. And then we generate. And there we go. So we just added a quick tree in there just for secondary purposes. Now you're going to notice something. So I sketched in that tree. Let's come down here and look at our most recent sketches. So you can see when I move the mouse over it, it shows me before and after. So if I bring this up, we can do this compare, and there's our tree compared to the sketch, but it didn't draw in any shadowing into the environment. And so the tree kind of looks a little bit out of place because it's not anchored with the shadow. So let's come up back over here. Let's come back up to the create area and image to render. Image to render takes an existing rendering and does things on it and then generates a new rendering based from that. So let's just come over here and select that previous image to work on in this image to render area. Let's make sure we're in Nano Banana Pro because again, it tends to be best at altering existing images and keeping them consistent. Rendair likes to kind of do new and creative things. So we come down to the describe area, describe the new scene, and I just say the tree doesn't have proper shadowing according to the sun's position. Add appropriate shadowing of the tree onto the ground based on the sun's position and we'll generate. So it put in nice shadows, so it kind of feels like it's more anchored to the ground right there. Kept everything else pretty similar. So for architecture, let's take a look at another interesting example of things that we could do. If we come up to create, there's another specific mode called elevation to render, and its purpose is to take a certain type of architectural drawing called an elevation rendering and turn that into an image. Let's go ahead and clear everything. And if we take a look at my example here, here's just a drawing. And let's say you've just gone into Illustrator and drawn this, or you've done it in some program, or you've hand sketched it. This is what this input type expects. I'll load that in, and then we'll give it a prompt. A modern apartment building. The top area is gray metallic slats, light concrete for the center section with glass windows and black trim. It's summertime, later afternoon, a few clouds in the sky. And we're going to leave this one in the Rendair mode, their default mode. This works really well for this type of novel scene creation. And we're going to go. And there we go. Really quickly, you were able to take and visualize that drawing without a huge amount of work in other modalities, just for visualization purposes. Let's take a look at one more final architecture example here. This is a very clean piece of input. Let's say that an architect has sketched something out that is much sort of more loose, free form. Let's see how the system handles that. We're going to switch back over here to the sketch to render mode. Let's say that we have something like this that's very rough, just very loose and rough. Let's use this as our input. And then we just give it a prompt. A modern house with large glass windows, black framing, white concrete exterior. The background is composed of beautiful mountains. The sky is blue with wispy clouds. There's a paved road in front of the house, and green grass and trees surround the house. It's early evening. So it's pretty rough. Let's go ahead and just see what the system gives us with these two pieces of input. And there we go, a quick visualization of this house with even just that rough sketch. The system interprets it and gives you a very nice initial impression of what your house could be. So let's say that you're a product designer or an industrial designer and you've sketched ideas out and you want to rapidly prototype them. For instance, let's say that we have this backpack here that we're designing and we've sketched it out. We have the idea, and now we want to rapidly visualize what that can look like. So we take that and drop that here into the sketch to render area, and then we just give it a prompt. A modern backpack with light earth tone green top and dark warm gray on the bottom, black strap and black plastic buckles. Photographic studio on a white background. Very simple, and then we test it out. So pretty quickly, after just a minute or two, it's given us a really nice rendition. And then this is where you could go on and you could do some different views and maybe an animation of it to help visualize the product. Let's do one final example here of a product or industrial type of design. So let's say that you have sketched up a VR headset. You just want to rapidly prototype what it looks like. So let's go ahead and take this and bring this into our sketch to render area. And then we'll just put in a prompt, a VR headset, black head straps with bump pattern, cool gray for the body and the headset, and dark glass covering, metal rings around the front glass. So you could just give it a description of the lighting and so forth, and then we will generate. Now we're going to do one with render and then one with Nano Banana, and then we'll just see which we like best. So that's really interesting. It's adding some detail here that I'm not sure I like. So let's go ahead and switch over and see what happens when we use Nano Banana to generate. So I really like this one that Nano Banana has done. It's probably closest to my sketch or my conceptual concept of what I was thinking this product could be.